guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm back with another fun video. I'll be sharing 3 new spring decor DIYs that are simple, budget friendly, and super cute. So if you're looking for some spring decor inspiration, I really think that you'll enjoy today's video. If you do, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Now let's jump right into today's projects. For the first DIY today, I'm making a Hello Spring sign. For this project, I'm using one of these unfinished wood picket fences from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting this entire piece with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. I only did 1 coat of this paint, and I did make sure to paint in between all of the wood pieces as well. I'm also using this Hello Spring unfinished wood piece that I picked up from Joann Fabrics. I think I paid either $1.99 or $1.49 for it, and I got it for 40% off of that. I'm painting the Hello word with my folk art chalk paint in the color Summer Porch. And then for the word Spring, I'm painting that with the folk art chalk paint in the color Sage Shadow. Next, I'm cutting a strip of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree. I'm cutting it long enough so that I have the 2 ends long enough that I can wrap around the front of my fence. And then I'm also cutting that ribbon in half to make it just a little bit thinner. And then I pulled the little burlap strips around the edges so that they looked a little bit more frayed. And then I took that burlap ribbon and then just hot glued the 2 ends of the ribbon along the back side of my fence. Now it's time to attach my Hello Spring wood piece. I'm placing hot glue on the back side of both of those words, and then I'm placing that in the top left-hand corner of my fence a little bit crooked. Then I'm adding some of these really pretty yellow flowers that I got from Walmart a few years ago, but you can get these types of flowers at any craft store. And I'm hot gluing those right over top of that burlap ribbon. I'm placing hot glue right on the stem of my flower and then just pressing that onto the burlap ribbon. And some of them I did place over top of each other. And I did have to hold the flowers in place until the glue completely set, just so that they wouldn't move around at all. I continued the same step over and over until I had my yellow flowers completely covering the bottom of that burlap ribbon and my fence. And then once I had all of the yellow flowers attached, I decided to add some of these white flowers that I got from Hobby Lobby. I just pulled them off of their stem, and then I did end up cutting the stems a little bit just to make them smaller to place over top of my yellow flowers. And to attach these flowers, I did the same thing as I did with the yellow flowers. I placed the hot glue right on the stem of the flower and then just pressed that down on my burlap and over top of the yellow flowers. Then I decided to add some Spanish moss at the very bottom of the stems of all those flowers, and I used hot glue to attach that. Once I had the Spanish moss on, I thought it would be really cute to add some more green at the bottom, so I used some reindeer moss from Dollar Tree and just hot glued that over top of the Spanish moss. For one last finishing touch to my sign, I decided to add a raffia bow. I used 3 strips of raffia and then tied those into a really simple bow and then hot glued that on the right top hand corner of my fence. And here's my Hello Spring fence sign all finished. This one was super easy to do and would be the perfect piece to add to the center of a wreath or maybe another larger project, or leave it just as is. Now moving into DIY number 2, I'm making a welcome spring sign. For this one, I'm using one of these larger signs from Dollar Tree. This one is from Valentine's Day. I just hadn't done anything with it yet. It has glitter on it, which I'm not a fan of, so I will be removing that, but I really loved that this sign had a frame around it. To remove the glitter, I took one of my putty knives and just started scraping that glitter off. This usually works great, but I did find that once I had the glitter removed with my putty knife, there was still like a little bit of a raised-ness, I guess you could say, to the lettering. So I took some sandpaper and just sanded that down as smooth as I possibly could. The only thing is I used a 60 grit sandpaper, so it did leave the back texture part a little bit rough, but I was okay with that. Just keep in mind that a 60 grit is probably not the best sandpaper to use for this. Once I had that all sanded down, I then went in and started painting my entire frame. I did use my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle, and I really loved that when I was painting this on, it was leaving a little bit of that wood grain underneath, and I think that gave it a really nice, kind of like a stained wood look, and I really liked how that turned out. Then I moved on and started painting the back surface of my sign, and I painted that with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I did paint 2 coats of this paint on the back. After my paint was completely dry, I'm then using one of these wreath stencils from Hobby Lobby. This one was $3.49, but they always have really good sales on them. I did have to cut it down just a little bit on the side to get it to fit inside of my frame. Once I had it placed exactly where I wanted it to be, I then used some painter's tape at the top and bottom to hold the stencil into place. The paint color that I'm using to stencil the wreath is from Folk Art, and it is called Sage Shadow. I really love this color. It's the perfect green color for spring. And to apply this paint color, I am using my Dollar Tree stencil brush, and I'm just building up that color a little bit at a time so that I don't have any bleeding. Once I had it all painted on and my paint was dry, I then removed my stencil. I'll be using a few other pieces in today's project, and one of them is this unfinished welcome word. This one did come from Hobby Lobby in a pack with a bunch of other different words, and I'll also be using some unfinished wood letters that spell out the word spring. These ones I think are from Meyer, but you can get unfinished wood letters at pretty much any craft store. I'll be painting the word welcome and all of my letters with my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I only did 1 coat of paint on all of them. Now it's time to attach my word and all of my letters to the center of my sign. I like to place them exactly where I want them to be before I start gluing them, because you don't know how many times I've started gluing stuff down and then it wasn't centered. So I always like to just set it down into place first before I start attaching them. I place hot glue on the back side of my welcome word and then place that exactly where I'd already had it placed, and then the same for all of my letters that spell out the word spring. And here is my welcome spring sign all finished. This one is such a simple piece, but I think it looks so high end. It only took me a few minutes to create, and it's just a really beautiful piece that goes with any decor. Now moving into DIY 3, I'm making a welcome birdhouse stand. For this one, I'm using one of these unfinished wood birdhouses, and this one is from Michael's, and it was 99 cents. I first started by painting the birdhouse with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. I only did 1 coat of this paint, but for the little inside crevices that you see on the front, I did have to use a really small paintbrush just to get that paint in there and not get it all over the rest of the birdhouse. For this project, I'm not going to need the hanger that's on this birdhouse, so I just clipped it off the top and then removed those strings. Once I had the strings removed, I then continued painting my birdhouse. I painted the roof with my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and then I did like the sides of the roof and then the bottom of the birdhouse, and then all of that trim that's on the front of the birdhouse. I painted that with the ink color too, and I did start using a thicker brush and it just wasn't working out, so I had to switch to a really small paintbrush so that I could have nice precise lines and not have it look all messy. I'm also painting the very bottom of my birdhouse with that same ink colored chalk paint because you will be seeing the bottom of the birdhouse. And then I wanted my house to have a more of a rustic look to it, so I took my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Castle on a fluffy paintbrush, and I just dry brushed this color on my entire birdhouse. I'm also using one of these paint stirrers. These do come in a pack from Home Depot, and I think you get like a whole big pack for like under $2. I already have mine pre-cut. This one is 6 inches long, and I'm painting the entire paint stirrer with my Waverly paint in the color ink, and I did, like I said, the entire piece, the front, the back, and the sides. Once that paint was dry, I then took that castle colored chalk paint that I used on my birdhouse, and I dry brushed that over top of this piece to keep it consistent and the same color as my birdhouse. Now I'm painting this small wooden box that I got from Dollar Tree with that same chalk paint in the color ink. I did 1 coat of paint on the entire box. Once the box was dry, I then took that castle color paint and dry brushed that over top of all of the ink colored paint. Just like before, I wanted to keep things consistent and have everything match, so I wanted to paint everything the same. But for this piece I got from Michael's. This is just like a little wooden piece, It does have a hanger on it, but I will be clipping that off. I painted this piece with my Waverly paint in the color Plaster. I did 1 coat of this paint on the entire piece, and then I used that same Castle color to distress it and just dry brush this over top of it. Next, I'm using these Welcome wood stickers. These are from the Target Dollar Spot a couple of years ago. I had them in my craft stash and I just really need to use them up. So I'm taking that same ink colored chalk paint once again, and I'm painting all of these letters that spell out the word welcome with this paint. Once the paint was dry, I then am just taking the wood letters off and placing them onto my white plank that I've already painted. And since they are like stickers, I don't have to hot glue them down. I just placed them kind of where I wanted them to be before I like really pushed them down onto my wood. Then I moved them around, and once I had them all in place, I pushed them down, and they seem to stick pretty well without using any glue. I did clip the hanger off of that, and then now I'm just attaching my paint stirrer to the bottom of my birdhouse, and then I'm using some of this floral foam from Dollar Tree. I just cut it down a little bit so it'll fit into my wood box, place it inside, and then I'm using some of this reindeer moss from Dollar Tree, placing that into my box over top of my floral foam, and then sticking my paint stirrer right down into that floral foam to hold everything into place. To add a little bit more detail to my birdhouse, I decided to add some Spanish moss to the roof. I just hot glued that right on, and then I did have to trim it down a little bit because Spanish moss can be pretty messy. After I had the Spanish moss on, I decided I wanted to add some reindeer moss as well, so I just hot glued the reindeer moss right over top of the Spanish moss, and I continued that same step and process for the entire roof of my birdhouse. Then for the last step, I'm hot gluing my welcome plank right in the center of that paint stirrer underneath my birdhouse. This is my birdhouse stand all finished. This is such a cute piece. Again, super simple, but yet it looks way more expensive than it took for me to make this. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it. And if you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing. And I would love to hear in the comments down below which project from today's video is your favorite. Thank you so much for watching.